Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfiltered Productions with Cornetti and Kraft Healthcare Solutions. You got Cornetti, you got Kraft, and you got the ampersand. Okay, so the next subject that we wanted to talk about was back office chaos. In our current environment of reimbursement, we have to be as efficient as possible as home health agencies in getting a patient in the door, but also to a viable bill that's not going to be scrutinized later or paid and then recouped later in an audit. So what I wanted to do was pose this question and let Cindy and Kraft riff and tell you some of our experiences of what it's like to assist people with efficiencies and agencies with efficiencies to getting the claim formulated, to getting the claim paid. And that includes coding and OASIS reviews, which we do on an outsourced basis for a multitude of clients. And so what are some of the things that we run into on a day-to-day basis as we're onboarding a new client? Who wants to start?
Well, since I tend to be involved in that on a regular basis, I think there's so many inefficiencies. And what really drives me crazy is that these are fundamental, basic routine activities. You got to get an OASIS collected, you got to get an OASIS clean, you got to get the OASIS out the door. And it's like, this is where, as we bring clients on, and how do you do it now? It's kind of like, how does that even work? I mean, how are you getting this through the process? And I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is the concern about speed. People want it out the door. There's concerns now with the discussions about what will happen with the RAP as we move forward and the need to get out the door quick. And it seems that the focus on speed immediately defaults to QA staff, that they have to, whether you have them in-house or you outsource, they just got to do the work faster. I mean, we need more of them, which then drives up your internal cost because you have all these people there ready to check everything. And it's like, but wait a second, speed is more than just the QA. And that starts with the issue of intake with respect to making sure you have what you need to code. And I am not even going to fake. I understand more than enough coding just to be dangerous. But Dee, when people are looking at the whole thing of process and checkers, how does that come out of the gate with that intake stuff specific to what do I have to add to code?
Listen, intake people need to be part of the culture of efficiency, just like on the patient end, the clinician does. At intake, the staff needs to understand, the account managers, the people processing these new referrals need to know what are acceptable primary diagnoses, need to know whether the hundreds of pages that they're going through really meet the criteria as established by CMS for a face-to-face, a valid face-to-face, beyond the timeline, and something being called a face-to-face. There is no set form that you can check off. And so does it have the content? And if it's being done by the person taking responsibility, the responsible physician for the plan of care, then how is that allocated? Or is it coming from another care setting like a hospitalist or the staff physician at the previous post-acute setting where the patient's being discharged from now to come to home care? How is all this information being collected? The fact that that referrals come in, get all the way through the system, go to the clinician, and the reason we're seeing them doesn't even match a face-to-face if we have a qualified face-to-face. And then when we look at the diagnoses that the physician puts on it, they're putting things that aren't even assigned to primary group assignment for primary codes, right? And so it just amazes me that why does it take it that long? Those kind of processes, those kind of systems that we put in place should not allow a referral to be moved into the system to start that 5-day window, that touch with a clinician, until we make sure that we have, the information that we need coming in, the basics. And worse yet, what happens is if we're picking an intake or a face-to-face that's totally valid, done within 90 days before the patient comes in by the primary care physician who is going to be signing the plan of care, and since that time the patient went in the hospital because they fell and broke their hip. I mean, is that really the valid face-to-face? I mean, we've seen these things happen. happen. And so I would say, we need to have stopgaps and say, wait a minute, the reason why they're coming to me, I know, is from the hospital because they just had an ORIF of their femur. I can't use this as a valid face-to-face. We should be doing all that prep work up front. We should have a culture of efficiency that starts with the intake and continues all the way through the office, out to the clinician, and then back into the office, so that we don't have checkers checking checkers, checking checkers, and we're loading up back office staff.
Dee, I am so glad that you said that, because so many times when we read those narrative notes, we can read the mystery start of care. It's like Scooby-Doo. It's like the van and the ghost, the old man coming out of the weeds and scaring the Scooby-Doo people. You get a face-to-face that says OA of the hip and hip pain, and then they just got home from the hospital, and so you're walking in the door as a nurse or a therapist, and it's like you're opening the doors to a haunted house. You have no idea what's going to present behind those doors. You don't even know if you brought the right equipment or the right information for that patient, because literally they have nothing. So starting with the intake is so key. I can't tell you, I'm sitting back here going, yeah, Dee, go Dee. So Cindy, when you're looking at those situations where the information is so minimal, the clinician goes into the house, what should the clinician do at that point?
Well, I think sometimes we treat the clinician, I'm just going to say it, like they're at the bottom of the food chain when it comes to OASIS data collection, and that anything that goes wrong is their fault, and that they need to be babysat and checked to death. I think the clinicians need to be active partners to say, listen, I don't have what I need, and to, I wouldn't say push back, but collaborate better. And to do that, I think they need to understand why this matters, because it's the same clinician, and I'll own it. You get jaded. Fine, it says OA, whatever. I'll figure it out when I get there, and okay, whatever. Oh, great. Now this time they sent me, I'm going to show my age, when the referral used to be on paper, and then you get this stack of paper, and it's like, I'm not reading all that stuff before I go to the house. Are you crazy? I don't have that kind of time. So then you get kind of disconnected. And then it ends up going past the clinician into the review process, and they're going, I can't code this. I don't even have the right information. And I'm thinking, if the coder can't code it now, after the assessment's been done, how'd you do the assessment without having a complete diagnostic picture of this patient, at least the primary reason you're there? But, that speed issue says, okay, fine. If we got coders, that would fix it. But you can't code unless you have the information. And then we say, well, but you got to review the rest of the OASIS. Well, here we go. Speed, again, is not just QA, because how many times, I'm just going to say this, my standard issue is, you can tell people who work in OASIS review because they have a callus in the center of their forehead from smacking their head on the desk. And they put reviewers, now we're working remotely, I get it, which is probably even safer. But they used to put reviewers physically, in corners of the office. Why? To keep them from killing clinicians. Because it's like, I can't take it. If I see this clinician make this error one more time, I'm going to become murderous. I'm sorry, it's the same mistake. And the cycle we have then is they need to be educated. Well, of course, clinicians need OASIS education. I'm not denying that whatsoever. But after that, as someone who teaches OASIS regularly, and you can see the look, well, back when we could see people beyond the Zoom call, but you could see people with I've already been to like 5 million OASIS trainings. I have been to OASIS training on an annual basis for 10 years. And what I want to say, especially on our outsourced business side, is apparently you've been asleep for 10 years. Because you make you're making the mistakes I'm trying to explain to you, and you act like you already know this. So I think there's a grace period initially when you're new to this, but then it becomes this codependent, I need a checker because they do it wrong and they never get better at doing it, so I need more checkers. And then it's the checker, how come you can't check it faster? Well, because I have to send it back to this person. And I know what's going to happen to some of the clinicians, because we see it on the outsource side. It gets sent back to them for correction and they ignore it for 2 weeks. I'm the QA. I can't make you give it back to me. I can't make you do that part. So I'm not trying to, say all kinds of nasty things about clinicians, but agencies, exactly what I'm talking about. You have pictures in your head of that small handful of clinicians that is causing a huge amount of rework and back and forth in these processes. And I'm over it, Dee. I'm going to turn this to you in a second. I am over the phrase. They are a wonderful nurse. They are a great therapist. They just mess up the OASIS.
Right. Or they mess up documentation, right? And so the idea is that the very least that your clinicians should go out with is having reviewed basic information that comes in the referral. You know, here's a classic case of home care trying to dance with what brung us, right? We used to get a name and an address and roll, and we thought that was fine. Albeit it was never fine, but it really is not anywhere near close to fine now in PDGM. It's amazing what kind of disconnect can be found between the referral documentation and the clinical documentation. And the role of that intake note, not the intake, the narrative note that goes with it is to splice this together from the last place that the patient was. The physician's referring them for this, so this is how they're presenting now that they're home, you know. And the fact is, I don't even know, you know, reading some of the narrative notes, if they're even present, even the evaluation notes, if a nurse opens the case by the therapist doing the evaluation, that it's anything other than copy and pasted, or it is simply just the same yada, 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 where we talk about the one-eyed cat that freaks everybody out. Irrelevant to the course of care, why don't you read the face-to-face document? Why don't you read the discharge disposition from the prior place of stay, right? Why don't you read those notes, clinicians? Because then that's going to say, this is what I should be finding. And when you find it, you splice it together, right? You make a consistent looking chronological picture of this patient in the record. But when you find a disconnect where it's like at odds with it, then that triggers a process where we go back to the physician. We go back and we look at the face-to-face. We maybe pursue a new face-to-face. We all have a responsibility in the culture of efficiency. It's beyond compliance. It's going to be, you know, to be able to get this stuff turned around in the time frame that we should be able to. So why we want to dance an old, you know, waltz when we got a samba on in PDGM just absolutely amazes me. It's not going to play well with that music. So come on, pick up your feet, learn a new dance, and start doing it the right way.
Well, Sherry,
On that note, I'm gonna-
no, you want to I think part of it, though, and I'm just going to put it out there as food for thought for those who are watching or listening. Part of the reason the clinician struggles to do this is directly related to productivity and this push on the number of visits per day. We're not
said
paid.
the P word, Dee.
I did. We're not paid per visit. We understand it's an outcome-based model, and yet we are still stuck in the number of visits or number of points, because that's what I hear from the clinician. I would do that. I would spend that time. I would look at that. I would follow up, but that's really hard to sell when I'm supposed to do 5 more visits today on top of this and try to juggle all these other things. And okay, you want me to be more efficient and get done faster and do all of this. So I think we have to really look at, what are we getting? Are we getting it fast, or are we getting it right? And how do we spend that kind of time and say, oh no, my clinician's doing fewer visits per day, but what am I saving on the fact that when that document gets turned in, I can just glance at it and submit the bill, because I'm not hunting down stuff to code it. I'm not making corrections all the time and sending them back over and over again. And everybody would be happier if we just could get it right at the beginning and stop all the time and dime spent fixing it on the back end.
And I would be remiss, I need to stop us here because we want to keep these brief, but as you guys can probably tell, we could go forever on this, and we've given away some really good nuggets that we hope that will help you with your back office processes. But if you are overwhelmed with your back office processes, reach out to us at www.valuebeyondthevisit.com. We have actually reformulated and retrained, and we can make you right and efficient. Cindy, is that a fair statement? I think that's our goal as a company. We do not want codependency. We want to improve your processes so that if Cornetti and Kraft is struck down by lightning tomorrow, your agency will be better off having spent some time with us and our help that we can provide. So I'm going to cut us off here, but I'm sure we maybe have another one of these in our pocket. I'm feeling that. Okay, everybody have a good time. We'll be in touch. Unfiltered Productions out.